Howdy folks, this is Devlog 1 of 100. In today's episode we will be exploring procedural animation. Remember, at Devlog 100 I will be making a huge game with everything I have learned so far, so stick around. Before we dive into my journey, I'd like to clear up that I did attempt this before. Here are the 2 clips from that attempt. I had not yet decided to make a YouTube series at that point. As you can see, I was getting nowhere, so I decided I would need some help. Max is one of the only people I know that has experience with Unity. In fact, he's the sole reason this series is happening at all. So I invited Max to help me figure out what I was doing wrong.
Hello.
Thanks to Max, I was able to get some useful tips and pointers of how the Unity software works. Although he couldn't help me with procedural animation, I did learn a thing or two about the program. Like any other, my journey began with creating a new project file with a very unique name and a very long loading screen. I set up a very basic scene for my little dude to walk on, and with that, I was ready. Before I started though, I imported some assets to make the scene a little less of an eyesore, consisting of gridbox materials. You can find them in the description. I still don't know how to set these up properly, so for now the sides of the platform was looking a little interesting to say the least. Finally, I decided to begin, starting out with a cube that I scaled on the X to serve as our body, and using smaller cubes scaled on the Y for our legs. There was a lot of trial and error scaling them to the size I liked, but in the end I finished with a lovely little quadruped. I think I'll call him Bob. After the form of Bob was created, I decided to colour him a bit and colour code his legs so he didn't look like such an average Joe. But he's missing a little something, so that's just much better. At this point, I opened up some tutorials and articles about how procedural animation worked. During this video, you'll find them linked in the description below. Per the tutorial's instructions, I imported the animation rigger from Unity's Asset Manager and set up the necessary components. Finally, after about 45 minutes of setup, it didn't work. I can be pretty silly sometimes, but procedural animation is way more difficult than I thought. So I watched it again and wrote down notes to make sure I was doing it correctly, and then decided I had done it wrong and closed the project. Yep, you're gonna see this a lot through my devlogs. But I didn't give up. I rewatched the video for the 4th time and the tutorial was using bones instead of objects, so I thought I should model a very quick quadruped in Blender to test with. I booted up Blender for the first time in a while and got to work, spending over an hour crafting and making sure everything was aligned, using my limited Blender knowledge to its limits, eventually coming out with a disappointment. I think I'll call him Azrael. I found a great tutorial on how to set up bones in Blender and gave Azrael some lovely bones for walking. Oh, and of course I gave him gamer shades. After Azrael was created, I exported him and created a brand new project with an even more unique name, created the scene, imported the textures, and I was back in business. A quick drag and drop let Azrael hop. Oh my god. A quick drag and drop let Azrael hop into Unity and I was immediately confused. Rather than a group of objects, the spider had an armature separate to the bones, which is something I hadn't seen yet. Although, with a quick browse, it wasn't as complex as I thought. I didn't realise that the shades were on the wrong side, so I quickly dragged them over as well. Hi, Future Azrael here. Between this and the next clip you're about to see, I did test a small bit without recording, which luckily one of my friends recorded while I was in a VC with them. Here is it now. I did get it to work straight after this with a different model I had built previously, so this is what gave me the motivation to keep going. I took a 24-hour break and returned energized, and went straight to work. I remembered from the last time that bones were the issue, so I hopped onto Blender and gave it another shot. I also experimented with some features since one of my friends was also working with Blender. Eventually, after about 30 minutes of modelling, I ended up with a small robot with 2 legs since I thought it'd cut down on complexity. Go ahead and give me a name for our little robot in the comments. I worked on the bones for a little while. When I was rewatching the tutorial, I realised that I'd actually skipped an important step. I won't explain it here since we're focusing on animation this episode. After about an hour, I finally did... After some fixes, our robot was actually moving correctly. I was very happy with myself, so I called it a day after an hour of development. Call me lazy, but sleep is good for you. In the morning, while drinking tea like the true Brit I am, I came across a video that had procedural animation alongside the code for it, which was perfect for me. So I watched the tutorial and looked over the code and called Max again because I didn't understand it. But eventually I knew what I had to do. So after a little tweaking and a loving touch, our robot friend was... Let's just skip to the next part. I gave it a second try with objects as I thought the bones could be the problem, and I also stole the face of the prefab for fun. A quick setup later and a few tweaks in the settings, I had finally gotten it to work. My creature was moving about, walking freely. It was not perfect in some areas, but for my very first successful attempt, I was happy. Outside this log, I will also be learning how to script, so hopefully as time goes on, I can improve my skills naturally. With that, I think for this log, that's plenty. Thank you all for watching. This took me about a week to get the footage and another week of editing since I do them myself, so any support with likes and subscriptions would be much appreciated. I'd also like to recommend you a game after each log. So for this episode, I recommend VRG, published by Latul88. I hope I said that correctly. An FPS game inspired by Wolfenstein and Titanfall 2, with the game progressing in an episode format like classic FPS. You can play the demo on itch.io or buy the early access on Steam. Maybe I should. I still don't know what to do for outros. I mean, that is an outro, right? Well, I don't know. Love you. Bye.